Live on the Spreaker Web Radio, you're listening to On Air with Lockie. G'day, my name's Lockie Harris and I'm the host of the brand new radio show On Air with Lockie. I've been waiting to do this show for ages, and to finally be given the green light to go ahead with this project is truly amazing. I'm really looking forward to this season as we're going to be discussing a lot of relevant topics and issues that are going on in today's society. And on the first episode now, you're going to hear an interview that I did with a good friend of mine called Jade, who is a dermal therapist, mental health nurse and aesthetic clinician. And we sat down and spoke about self-image, self-perception and having the conversation about mental health. Here's what we got. Jade, tell me a little bit about your background so we get to know who you are and what you've been doing.
So my name's Jade. Originally I was an ICU nurse, so I worked in intensive care with very sick people for quite a few years. Following that, I moved on to the ambulance service, and I worked with very ill people again, and people from all different walks of life, so higher socio-economic clients and patients, right through to lower socio-economic brackets, people with lots of social issues, and people from wealthy backgrounds, poor backgrounds, multicultural, lots of mental health as well. I'm also a mental health nurse, so I've worked in rehabilitation and acute mental health wards, as well as within the community with some people that suffer from chronic mental health disorders. Now I'm a cosmetic nurse, a teacher, a trainer within that arena, as well as a laser therapist and a dermal therapist. So my interest now lies in facial and body aesthetics, essentially. I worked for a plastic and cosmetic surgeon for quite a few years, and now I work within a skin clinic, as well as my teaching role within the community. So I have a broad background in both physical health, mental health, and aesthetic health or skin health. So, I work a lot on a daily basis with people's self-perception, be that positive or negative. And what I do know and have come to realise is that our self-perception has a significant effect on our mental health and vice versa.
Wow, that's very interesting. You know, obviously you have done a lot. A lot of people have sort of a view on what positive self-perception or self-image is and what negative self-image is. As a mental health nurse, what do you think, what is your definition of positive and negative self-image?
Well, first I think we have to think about what body image is to start off with, whether that be positive or negative. And basically, body image is a way that a person perceives their physical their physical appearance, or the way their personal image, or what how they think about the way that they look, essentially. It's not just looks, though. Obviously, self-perception is to do with all sorts of things, from the way that we live our lives to the interactions that we have with other people to the work that we do. So nothing can be really divorced from our environment and our genetics. So if we're talking about body image, to me, body image is the way that an individual thinks and feels and perceives their body to be. So it is a perception. It's not necessarily based in actuality or the real world. It's a subjective idea about the image that we portray to the external world. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that is a realistic view. It doesn't mean that what we see in the mirror is necessarily congruent or the same as the way that we actually think our image is within that mirror. I often have people coming through the clinic who are focused on certain things facially or bodily that they view to be less than ideal, and it is just their view that that part of their body is less than ideal, asking myself or one of our staff members to actually fix that issue or that problem. It is a reality that in many cases when people are focusing on certain things within their image or on their body or to do with their body, that when they're talking about this thing that is affecting their lifestyle or affecting their self-perception in a negative way, they're wanting me to fix it. Their idea is often that if I fix it, in some respect, their life is going to be better. Yes. Now, that is not always the case. And often these things are actually small things that, from an outsider, when I look at things a little bit more objectively, because I'm not subjectively involved in what's going on in their mind and their personal self-perception, it's not something that I would necessarily see as an image. Or not necessarily something that I would see as being a problem. So I deal with that on a daily basis, and it's quite an interesting thing, the way that our mind, the way that we think about ourselves subjectively, affects our self-perception, because it is not an objective thing.
I don't know, Jade, whether you've seen a reality show on Foxtel called Botched. Basically, it's all about people who have had surgery for whatever reasons in the past, and it's been incorrectly done. So a lot of people come into the two plastic surgeons with sometimes unrealistic ideas, and even on one of the episodes there's this man who is known as Ken, like Barbie and Ken, and he's told by the doctors that he cannot have certain implants that he wants put inside of his body, but towards the end of the episode, he says, "Oh, I don't care. I'm just going to go get it anyway. You know, it doesn't matter whether they say I can have it or not. I'm just going to find someone who will do it for me." Do you think that treating someone like that with those sort of unrealistic expectations is going to help them?
Lockie, that's a really good question. It's something that all clinicians within the aesthetic industry actually need to consider. We actually need to think about whether that is doing the right thing for that client, which brings us back to things like, and we need to consider things like body dysmorphic disorder. Body dysmorphic disorder is something that is considered to be quite prevalent and on the rise within our community. It's thought that between 1% and 2% of the population may have body dysmorphic disorder. From what I see, I think it's probably a little bit larger. It's basically a mental illness. People have this illness, constantly worry about the way they look. They think that an inconspicuous or non-existent or even a physical attribute that is there is more serious and defective than what it actually is. And the severity varies amongst people, but these people also believe incessantly that having that thing fixed or altered is going to change their life. That is not the case. We find with people with diagnosed BDD, when we actually alter that particular perceived imperfection, that person either moves on to another perceived imperfection within their body and focuses on that and thinks that that needs to be fixed, or they will see any little irregularity within that area that was treated or that thing that was treated and believe that that thing needs to be fixed. And it's just a self-perpetuating, sort of roller coaster that we go on as clinicians. So, in my practice, when I come up against someone that I think might have BDD, I try to discuss it with them. I'm a nurse. I can't diagnose, but I would refer them on to a mental health professional. And I would actually ask questions about how this negative self-perception affects their lives, because we know that with BDD, for example, or body dysmorphic disorder, that, it can even lead to suicidality, suicidal ideation, so thinking about suicide, acting on suicide, agoraphobia, that's not wanting to leave the house, not wanting to be out in public, and things like that. And in some cases, it actually destroys people's lives in severe cases. So it can be a horrible, horrible thing. The general rule of thumb in our industry is never treat someone if you don't think that you can meet their expectations. So I would never treat someone if I didn't think that the service that I provide meets their expectations. And with someone who is has more normalised and appropriate circumstantial expectations, sometimes it's just a matter of discussing what their expectations are and giving them a realistic outlook on what the final result will be. So if we talk about you, for example, not that you've got BDD, but we think about your acne, okay? So I guess at this point in time, it's important for me to say that the way that I met Lockie was actually through our clinic, and he had what we call a grade 4 acne. Do you mind me talking about this, Lockie?
Fine, yeah.
Okay. So Lockie came to us through our clinic with a grade 4 acne, and that's considered the most severe of all acne. Now, when I met you, Lockie, you were the same person, but you were quite different in a lot of ways. And one of the most amazing differences between the Lockie that I know now and the Lockie that I knew then was that you really suffered from a negative self-perception, okay? Yes, there was an issue with acne, which was very severe, the most severe on the scale of acne rating, but it was debilitating your life. It had really, invaded every part of your life. So that meant, difficulties at school, okay, and relating to others, whether that was a result of being teased through having acne, not understanding that your skin can have such a massive effect on your self-perception and who you are as a growing person. We know that in adolescence is when we're really forming and, really substantiating a lot of neural connections that lead us into adulthood. So it's a time when we're really discovering who we are as adults. So in relation to you, Lockie, what that meant is I saw this adolescent who was definitely more mature than his years, and his peers, suffering mentally, and to the point where I know that there was times when you were having thoughts about suicide and you were quite severely depressed. That meant I wasn't only treating the acne, I was also treating the person behind the acne. So for me, it was about addressing that whole person and your self-perception. So if we actually talk about your history a little bit and have a think about this, from a medical perception, we know that what we could offer within our clinic was not going to fix your problem. We also know that the gold standard for the kind of acne that you have is vitamin A taken orally. Now, that particular drug taken orally has major systemics on us physically and mentally. One of them is an increased suicidal tendency or ideation, thoughts about suicide. So what that meant for you is that you could not be prescribed that oral vitamin A because it could lead to increased tendency to act on your suicidal thoughts or depressed thoughts. So it meant what we had to do was address your self-perception and negative body image and work with you on that level, as well as working on your skin, but working on your self-perception and how you view yourself to bring it into a more positive light so that no longer affected your mental health. We were able to do that quite successfully to the point where those suicidal thoughts and those the depression was much less than what it had been before, and you had a much more positive self-perception of yourself as a whole, rather than just viewing yourself as being an acneic adolescent. You actually had a positive outlook about the entirety of who you are as a person, and it meant that, you could go on that drug, which is now able to slow down the acne. You're a good example of how your mental health is awesome. I'm sure, like everyone, you have your up days and your down days. More consistently, what I see in you is a positive self-perception.
Yeah, I definitely do have more of a positive self-perception of myself compared to last year. I definitely remember getting up every morning when my skin was at its worst, looking in the mirror and thinking, how disgusting and ugly do I look? I had this image in my head of what I wanted to look like, but what was on the outside was totally different. So yes, that was very, very, very frustrating. And I didn't really want to go out. I just sort of wanted to seclude myself from my social life, from everything really, because I just didn't want to go out looking the way that I did. But now I'm feeling a lot more confident because of the fact that I'm on the right medication and am on the journey to fixing my skin, which, subsequently helps make me feel better about myself. And, you know, eventually I'm really looking forward to the day when I have no acne on my face. It's going to be great.